Our FMSQ coverage is brought to you by STP 1958, your one-stop shop for engines, clutches, engine rebuilds, and parts. Check them out on the web at stp1958.com or on social media at STP1958. The FMSQ Canadian National Cross Country Championship kicked off this past weekend at the Sand Trap Round in Tuque, Quebec. And while there was some significant rain leading up to the season opener, the sandy topsoil in Tuque just drank that moisture up, and we ended up with perfect racing conditions for the 919 registered starters over the 2 days of racing. Here's the 3 key things you need to know coming out of round 1. First, Tyler Medaglia and defending FMSQ Series champ Véronique Pellerin-Chainé took very convincing wins in the pro men and pro women's races. 2. While Medaglia won by just under 1 minute 40 over defending champ Alex Goujon, if you eliminate 2 costly mistakes from Alex, he would have been just 19 seconds back and putting pressure on Tyler. In Vero's case, she also won by just under 1 minute 40, but the data shows us that she could be pushed hard for the overall title this year by a few different women. Coming into the series opener, we had officially broken the news that Tyler Medaglia was going to be switching from an MX-focused season to an off-road focused season in 2025 that would see him committing to race the full FMSQ series. This certainly had added a lot of buzz to the Pro Men's Championship, as Medaglia instantly became a favorite to possibly dethrone 4-time defending series champ Alex Goujon, based on his ISDE palmarès, his multiple national enduro championship wins at the Corduroy Enduro, and his single race successes in the occasional GNCCs and FMSQs that he had done. Throw in the unique combination of speed, commitment, and aggression that he built up through years of pro motocross racing and Canadian championships on the track, it was hard to bet against Medaglia coming into a sand track that favored his style of riding. Still, Goujon and the likes of Phil Cheney, Blake Leonard, and Owen McKill, to name just a few of the great riders in FMSQ, weren't going to simply roll over and concede the race and the series to Medaglia. And that's what we saw play out in a terrific season opening. The race started with Ryder Heacock taking the whole shot, but Medaglia wasn't far back, and by the time the field reached the Sandpit Arena near the end of the lap, he had made the pass on 6-time former FMSQ champ Leonard to take the lead. Goujon, on the other hand, had a fairly brutal start and was forced to fight his way back to near the front of the race, finishing lap 1 in 4th place behind Leonard and Jake Michaud, 29.2 seconds behind Medaglia with teammate Cheney right on his back wheel. By the end of the second lap, Goujon had established himself in P2, but had lost another 5 seconds to Medaglia in the process as the leader had clear track, as opposed to Goujon having to fight his way past Michaud and Leonard. Medaglia executed perfectly on his pre-race strategy of getting the early lead and sprinting hard for the first 2 laps before the track started to blow up and he would have to start contending with lappers. From that point, he was able to ease off a little bit, but still ran the fastest lap for every lap except for laps 6 and 8, which was the final one. The 6th lap actually went well for Medaglia, except for a brutally long pit stop that we timed at 35 seconds from stopping to restarting. Contrast that with Goujon's pit stop on the same lap that we timed at 9.23 seconds. This wasn't enough to change the race in the end, but Medaglia has to get this sorted out, as giving up 24 easy seconds like this could prove fatal as the season progresses. While Goujon clearly had the speed to run closely with Medaglia, he effectively lost the chance to compete for the win after his poor start and first lap, where he fell behind by those 29.2 seconds. He then gave away the pit stop time advantage he had gained by hitting a tree out on course. These 2 moments cost Goujon 1 minute and 20.7 seconds by our calculations, and would have put him only 19.153 seconds behind Medaglia at the finish if all other things remained equal. This will no doubt be weighing on him as he prepares for round 2, but hopefully he can take the positives we see from eliminating those mistakes. A key factor that we want to address is that giving Medaglia an early lead creates a terrible disadvantage for the rest of the field. It reminds us of how devastating Billy Bolt is in Super Enduro when given an early lead. Bolt and Medaglia are both going to be almost unbeatable in that situation. As the race progressed, Leonard settled into a comfortable 3rd place ride. After the race, he spoke about a lack of seat time really impacting him, especially early in the race as he struggled with arm pump. But he came alive in the last 3 laps as he found his flow, laying down the fastest lap times on laps 6 and 8, and the second fastest lap on lap 7. It was clear to see after the race how happy he was with his result, and it seems clear that he believes he can beat any of the top riders if he manages to carve out a bit more riding time. Cheney and Michaud were pretty much wheel-to-wheel racing back in 4th and 5th over the second half of the race as they worked to chase down Leonard. Although Cheney threw in a massive lap 7 effort to build a gap, couldn't sustain it over the final lap, eventually finishing 3.5 seconds behind Michaud as the pair rounded out the top 5. BC's Owen McKill had come into round 1 after taking the leader's plate in the SOR Sprint Enduro Championship back in Alberta, and was feeling good after the long drive from Calgary to Montreal as he got in some testing with the Sherco 250 SEF and 300 as he looked to pick his Fmsq ride. In the end, he somewhat surprisingly went with the 250 option, saying it suited his riding style better and that the 250 revved in what for him was a sweet spot. Unfortunately, McKill struggled mightily over the first 2 laps of the race as he suffered fueling issues that were believed to stem from moisture in his gas. That issue was a major contributor to him dropping well off the pace, but as the moisture came out of the fuel, he was able to get his head down and charge back from mid-pack all the way to 6th by the finish. From looking at the race data, it's clear that McKill has the speed to run with the leaders and to challenge for an overall podium, but he'll have to be sure to not override the bike to do that. McKill is an aggressive rider, no doubt, but that aggression does cause him to make small, costly mistakes on occasion. When it was all said and done, Medaglia took a comfortable 1 minute 39.583 second win over Goujon on, as we mentioned earlier, a track that suited his MX talents. With another sandy track coming up in round 2, and then the deep sand of Gopher Dunes in round 3 at a facility he knows inside and out from his motocross factory racing days, Medaglia could be setting himself up well for the overall championship. Goujon and the rest of the Fmsq regulars will need to leverage their track knowledge at Saint-Michel-des-Saints to the maximum to help keep the round 1 winner in check. Moving over to the pro women's side of the race, it was defending Fmsq champion Véronique Pellerin-Chainé opening up her title defense with a convincing 1 minute 44.858 second victory over Felicia Robichaud and a 3 minute 19.58 second gap over last year's P2 overall finisher Emma Sharpless. Vero led the last 4 laps of the 5-lap race, and after she took the lead, she was pretty much out of sight of the chasers. But while this makes it seem like an easy win and an indicator for how the 2025 championship might go, the data, however, tells us an interesting story about how the remaining 7 rounds may be more interesting than you'd think. Let's start with the most interesting data points, and they belong to 4th place finisher Mila Paget. While Paget finished 3 minutes and 29 seconds back of Vero, she was actually incredibly competitive outside of a poor first lap and a hard lap 4 crash. That first lap put Paget in a hole, losing over a minute to Sharpless and Vero, but she stormed back right away by throwing down the fastest second lap, putting 5 seconds back into the eventual winner, and just about 50 seconds back into Sharpless and Robichaud. Lap 3 was also a good one for Paget. She was only 6.5 seconds off of Vero's pace, and just over half a second slower than Robichaud. She managed to put a total of just about 2 minutes and 40 seconds into Sharpless over those 2 laps. Then came the lap 4 crash that cost her around 2.5 minutes and effectively ended her chances for a podium finish. She did bounce back with a gutsy 3rd fastest final lap though, just 17 seconds slower than Robichaud's fastest lap time, which saw her hit the finish line 9.5 seconds behind Sharpless. This, to our thinking, could have been the most exciting ride of the day at round 1, and we're looking forward to seeing what she brings to round 2. Looking at Robichaud's race, we see that she rode very well despite limited off-season prep. Although she was bouncing between 96 and 98 to 99% of the fastest lap times, she did set the fastest time on the final lap, remarkable for someone with so little seat time on such a physically demanding racetrack. There's no question that Robichaud can be in the title hunt this season. Switching back to Vero, we see that she only set the fastest times on laps 3 and 4. Her other laps, though, were all well within 0.5% of the fastest times. This tells us that she rode smooth and fast throughout the whole race, and it speaks to how skilled she is at race management. This was a championship caliber ride, no doubt, and in a season where it looks like she could get pushed by Robichaud, Paget, and Sharpless, it was good for her to take the maximum points in the first round to start building a cushion. Coming up next, we head into round 2 at Saint-Michel-des-Saints, and we're sure to see some more great racing. Round 1 saw an incredible 919 entries, and from our understanding, we could easily see more at the next one. Just for fun, think of this number of entries in contrast to an average GNCC. When you consider that GNCC draws from the entire eastern seaboard of the US, along with parts of Canada, with Fmsq drawing from the population of Ontario, Maritimes, and Quebec, you can see that this is, per capita, a much higher participation rate than we would see at GNCC. Congratulations to all the riders, volunteers, fans, and officials that make Fmsq such a great series. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in less than 2 weeks at round 2.